All right. I think I might be getting Angela getting connected. Hey, there you are.
Hello,
Our
hello.
first
Yay.
ever live.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Oh my
Oh,
goodness. I feel like I need more light, but whatever.
I know. I
Good
know.
morning,
So,
coffee.
I know. Cheers. Cheers. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I mean, you know, I'm good and the world's on fire, so I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really actually intense. I mean, I'm good, I think, because we had this little pre-chat that was super inspiring, and so I'm really excited to talk with you about some of the things that are near and dear to my heart. And
Likewise.
I'm feeling some despair, to be honest. Like the world is in a really, really hard place right now.
Yeah.
Difficult, really difficult. There's a lot of compounded trauma that's happening this year. I mean, I think we already had
Yeah.
so much trauma, and then it's just layer on top of layer on top of layer. How about you? How are you?
I I couldn't agree more. I think it's 2020 has been a transformational year for so many people. And not in the most positive way. And that's why we're so excited to have you here now because I mean, I sat in the audience and listened to your talk, and I was blown away at the information with ketamine. I don't think I really had gotten in that deep with that information and understood how safe and accessible it can be, with provided working with somebody like you. So, can you give us just a little bit of a foundation of it? I know that there's a couple of different types of ketamine. There are ketamine treatments. Can you just kind of give us a brief little overview of that?
Sure. So ketamine was used very widely throughout the world during Vietnam War and in different wartime settings as an alternative to morphine. It's very safe as far as its uh, pain relieving effects compared to morphine, which can suppress your breathing drive. It's also used, it's a World Health Organization, one of the 100 most required medications for countries to have, primarily
Wow.
for use as anesthesia because of its safety profile. And it's used on children, it's used in animals for surgery, it's used in elderly populations, and it's pretty safe. But the really cool thing about ketamine is it has a powerful antidepressant effect, which is amazing. And it's a really powerful psychedelic. So as people had been using it for surgery, they started noticing that people were feeling less depressed after surgery, which could certainly be because they're no longer facing the nervousness of surgery, but also there was something going on there. It turns out that ketamine works on a different receptor system than most antidepressants. Most antidepressants work on the FSRI system, and this works on, I can't ever get it right, the NMDA or something like that pathway. It's
Mm-hmm.
and so it's what the only psychedelic that really can be used while people are on other antidepressants for the most part. And in the hospital setting, it's really helpful if people are coming in with suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
It's been shown to be able to be used immediately to kind of knock people out of that and have some effects for a while. So that's super cool that it has that effect. But the other part about it is it does really allow people to have a psychedelic experience. And I find that it can be really profoundly helpful for people in their healing process. It's not certain the mechanisms of how that works, but my rudimentary and ever evolving thoughts about how it works is that when we are in a mental state that is harmful, I guess. Like, let's say someone's struggling with anxiety or depression or whatever. Like, what happens is we start getting into these ruminating thought patterns. Maybe we are like worrying about the future or we're freaking out about the past. And essentially, we've activated the default mode network, which is a really important network to have when it's healthy and intact. But when we're moving into a pathological pathway with the default mode network, we're in this ruminating or tripping about the future
Yeah.
place. And what ketamine can do is it can quiet that default mode network. It can allow for some novel thought patterns to emerge. And it also seems to activate what sounds like it's called the task positive network. It's something that we see a lot when people are meditating deeply. It's or in flow state. It brings you to this place where you are in the very much present moment. And it's not something that can last for a very long time. But the more we can come back to what's happening in this present moment, the less we can future trip, the less we can worry about the past. So it's really great to have those kind of on board. The other nice thing about ketamine, and I think other psychedelics too, but ketamine particularly, seems to allow people to have their trauma come forward, and but it doesn't seem to have the same triggered effect that you might have by thinking about a traumatic event. It will allow you to examine that traumatic event, but kind of from different angles. So whereas you may have had this impulse of your traumatic event and your response to it is fear, panic, anger, whatever, instead it just kind of shows this, but then you can look at it like, oh, this is another way of seeing what's happening, and this is another way of seeing what's happening, and I noticed how I respond in that way. So that, I think, can be really impactful. It can be really impactful because then people, if you only ever see things one way, it just gets stuck, you know? And it's not to disavow someone's personal experience. I mean, I came to ketamine because I had my own PTSD and had done a lot of work in my lifetime to heal that, and then had had my PTSD exacerbated. I'm a registered nurse, and I was working at a hospital. I'm also a bereaved parent. I had a child that died when she was 6 months old, and it was in the hospital, and it was really hard. And I worked really hard to get beyond that, but I definitely had PTSD. Like, all of the hallmarks, was diagnosed with that. When I started working with ketamine, I had completed my training at CIIS in the Psychedelic Assisted Therapy program, and then moved on to do a ketamine assisted therapy training with Dr. Phil Wolfson. And I was like, man, ketamine, I guess if I have to work with ketamine, that's all I got. And about 3 weeks prior to this training, which was an experiential training in addition to a didactic one, I was working at the hospital, and I had a really bad outcome with my patient and with that patient's baby. Their baby died, and it was just traumatizing and very hard. And I hadn't quite realized the depth of the exacerbation for myself. I knew that it had been, and I did a bunch of work, but then I went to this training. And the first time that I had an experience with ketamine, the very next day I was like, oh, okay. Like, I got it the next day. Like, I felt just a lightness. It wasn't like I'd had some profound experience that like made me one cosmic whatever with whatever, but instead it just kind of like shifted something. It kind of like lubricated my thoughts a bit, where I felt really kind of rigid, and it kind of like softened things. And from that place, I was then able to kind of build in more habits that supported my own healing. So yeah, that's why I came to work with it. And it's really has a potential to be really helpful for a lot of people, I think.
What a beautiful, beautiful story. I so appreciate you. Oh my gosh. And just the thing that really speaks to me personally, because I think I'm in this world as well, is the very westernized medical model. And then, the softening, that ineffable quality of this work, really, truly. And you say, rather than the medical, this is in your PowerPoint's presentation from the conference, rather than the medical model of psychedelics, what might a psychedelic model of medicine look like? Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
I love that. I love that.
Us too.
It's an emerging question. I still have a lot of questions about that. In the work I do with people, we always set intentions before we do our work. And a lot of times when we set intentions, we have to talk about what we don't want before we can get to what we do want. And so a lot of times when I talk about the medical model of psychedelics versus a psychedelic model of medicine, I have to talk a bit about what the medical model of psychedelics is starting to look like and is concerning to me.
Yeah.
So what I'm seeing happen in the medical model is that psychedelics are a drug that people have to take in order to get better. That there's a kind of a gatekeeper profile of people that can or cannot have things dependent on who, either the provider or the insurance companies or your income amount. There's many things that are inhibiting people's access. I'm also seeing, I do think it's really important to be clear about what kind of skill set providers should have. So I do think some regulatory body or oversight is important. Yet I'm also concerned that someone, because they simply have a label of nurse or whatever, means that one is qualified to do that work. Whereas also there might be someone out in the field that is a lay practitioner that has incredible skill that I may never know. So I'm also concerned that ketamine particularly is being turned into a real for-profit model. You know, a lot of people, there's a lot of ketamine clinics popping up that are running people through it at a very high dollar amount. And then because they're not getting the relational supportive care that they need to heal, it's not really healing them. It works for a little while, but not long term. So to me, a psychedelic model, I mean, at its base, we understand that the meaning of psychedelic is its mind manifesting, or that it's also awakening this inner healing wisdom. And I feel that there's a way for us to scaffold people on their healing journey, to support them, and to also recognize that healing isn't just an individual process. And I think Western medicine, of course, if you have a broken leg, yes, that's like an embodied personal experience that needs support, but it's different than like depression and anxiety. A lot of those things really, really come from a society that's broken, you know, and to heal in this society, it's going to require more relational pieces. So the psychedelic, ketamine in this case, is a tool for transformation, but people really need the support in getting there and then embodying and integrating what that experience is showing them, and kind of what direction they are intuiting is the way that would be the best course for them. And to me, that includes diet, that includes touch, that includes so much relationship work, that includes community, that includes the environment that we're living in, both in our home, but also the bigger planet. So it's much more interrelated. And I think a lot of people that have a psychedelic experience, what is so fascinating for people is so many people come to recognize the interconnectedness of things. You know? And I'd be much more interested in working in a healing model that was informed by that interconnectedness rather than the kind of piecing things apart. And there's a value to the Western model, 100%, and I'm trained in that way, but it's not fixing things. I mean, things are still really, really messed up, and people aren't really getting healed in it. And also, I mean, just from my personal experience, like people are frontline workers, healthcare providers, everyone that's working on the front lines right now is experiencing secondary trauma. Working with COVID or working with this fire, or there's just a lot more that these systems ask of us that I don't think is in service of healing. So, what do you think about that?
Oh man, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, we have information. We have the internet at our fingertips. The information is not the problem. Community is a healing. And I learned this, I participated for many years in 12-step recovery work, and I came across the rat park study where they put all the rats together with both sexes, with plenty of interaction and community, basically, and none of them had destructive habits. None of them went towards what they thought were addictive. I think it was cocaine in the water, the cocaine laced water, that the other rats and that were isolated, completely alone, of course. And here we are, all isolated in our little homes, and we've had 2020 to whoop our ass into a realization that, oh my God, we are interconnected, that your health does affect me. Wow.
Yeah.
when our society teaches us, no, we're so separate. And that person on the street who's homeless, it's their fault. Hmm.
Yeah.
No, that was probably a vet that fought for us. You know, that
Yeah.
what there's it's just it's inherent trauma. Our society is inherent trauma. And I'm so impassioned by you and your message to the practitioners even at the conference, the people who spoke up with the Q&A. Hey, how do I know the medications that I'm providing for my clients, my patients, they're not working. How can what can I do? And what was your response?
I was said it's time to be bold and start prescribing these things. And I think that that's really hard for people to do.
Yeah.
The licensing boards are pretty strict, but I mean, I feel grateful as a nurse that I can say things like that because my role as a nurse is to be a patient advocate and to speak for patients. And that's part of a community conversation is that the evidence is there that, you know, antidepressants have their place 100%. And I've taken them at times in my life for sure. And I think they're very important. Yet to just have that as the only answer, it's ignoring so many other pieces. One interesting thing about that particular question at the conference is I ended up connecting with that provider afterwards. And since then, that provider has started working with ketamine in her practice and had some really lovely success and has also started collaborating with other providers. So it's like kind of been rippling out effect. Very, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about making it, I mean, because starting with COVID and not riots, but protests and all, I mean, just the stuff that's happening in this world. And I was actually part of a conversation of bringing psychedelic medicine to more BIPOC communities. How do we do that? What are the models of practice with psychedelic practitioners as this model continues to unfold? What would you like to see?
Oh my gosh. Well, I first of all want to say that I will speak to it to the best that I can, but I'm not really the person that, I will do my best and I really honor the practitioners that have more, the people of color or indigenous people that have this experience more, but I'll do my best. Also, I want to say real quickly that Kalindi Ai has passed because of COVID since then. It was such an incredible opportunity to be with him at the conference last year. He was a luminary and a real incredible human being. And it's heartbreaking to me that this virus took him, Yeah, I feel really sad just sharing that right now because I think he was such a beautiful leader in the psychedelic world. But so that leads me to say that I think in order to make this work more accessible is we need more practitioners that are people of color or transgendered or across the board. And they don't necessarily have to be lettered folk because that's, higher education is, there's so many racial problems just there and getting access to medical school or nursing school or whatever. Like there's already inherent challenges there. So, but I would love to see more people that could work as practitioners and care for a variety of people. But as far as what I can speak to around accessibility, I think the really important thing to remember is that ketamine is an inexpensive medicine. Yeah. It's very inexpensive. I think I mentioned in the talk that a company called Janssen did studies with ketamine and discovered its effectiveness as an antidepressant. And then chose, because ketamine is off-label and off-patent, that to make S-ketamine or Spravato, which was approved by the FDA. It's approved for treatment-resistant depression, and it's about $800, $900 a pop. And it has very strict protocols for how it's used. And that just seems wrong. When ketamine itself is dollars, I mean, a couple bucks, seriously, just for the medicine versus an $800 ticket for the medicine. And more evidence that supports that Spravato is a problem is that in the National Health Service in the UK and Wales just rejected Spravato for the second time, partially because of the cost and partially because of the treatment model of requiring it to be highly medicalized. So you know, it's problematic. One thing that I'm super interested in would be to develop more of a community acupuncture model of ketamine
Hmm.
therapy, which is a little tricky to think about right now with COVID, but I think it could come in some ways where it might be a space that is overseen by a medical provider, a bold medical provider that would be willing to medically clear people, but then people come in for their ketamine assisted therapy, and I personally prefer an intramuscular ketamine or a lozenge ketamine versus
Okay.
IV, and I'll speak to that in a moment if you help me remember to speak to that.
So, yep. Okay, we're back.
We're back. We're frozen. Oh my God.
Yay.
Where'd you lose me? Or did you?
Oh no, you said remind me to speak about that, about the lozenge and the
I know.
yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk about that. But I could imagine in a community acupuncture type space where you, let's say someone comes in because they've been working with someone who understands ketamine, and the goal of that relationship is not for that person to get ketamine. The goal of that relationship is to transform their depression, anxiety, the feelings of feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or whatever. Like they're working on healing this piece. And we know that we can bring them to this place to have ketamine as a tool for transformation, but it's not the bulk of the work that we're doing together.
Mm.
And then that person goes with their provider to this community acupuncture clinic, community ketamine clinic, has their ketamine experience with their provider available to be with them with some subtle medical oversight, meaning just having loving presence of people keeping their eyes open. And I'm also wondering about folding in a psychedelic doula training of some kind. So there would be a way to have uh, just people serving there, much like a doula birth model
Yeah.
that could be connected to these people as they come through and can just offer that loving support and presence. And then when you're done with your session, then you get taken care of at home, or you get to, it's more, um, it's less of a model where someone comes in and has to take, 5 days with an IV at $5,000 a pop or whatever. It's more of like kind of titrated as needed. Um, but did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, no, I love that. I personally have been to working class acupuncture here in Portland, and I love that model, and I can totally see that being available for ketamine. And the thing that is so important about that is that people have a certain amount of control. One, the accessibility is there because the affordability too, but it's a little bit more agency. When
Yeah.
I'm intimidated when I go into a medical setting and it is me and a doctor. I oftentimes I'm like, I don't know, you're the professional. I'm a student of massage, and I have people doing that with their own bodies, coming in and
Yeah.
saying, I just, this hurts, but I don't really know what it is. Can you feel it? Can you feel into it? And it's like, well, not necessarily. You're the professional. It's your body. And I think that's the agency that we need to offer back to individuals, because that agency is part of the embodiment and it's part of that
Mhm.
healing.
Absolutely. It's part of the trauma wounding
And
that people lost.
yeah, and that group psychedelic model, another part of the healing, and just speaking personally for me, is the witnessing, is the other people witnessing the transformation to go, no, 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 wait, you were like this when you came in, or you were like this a couple weeks ago, and this too is growth. We have this idea of like this gotta get it, in this society. It's like instant, Instacart, it's at your door, all of that's just being programmed into us. And so I feel as if individuals, including myself, have often looked to medicine work as like a quick fix, and not understanding the integration and not understanding that embodiment practice. It's so deep, but it needs that support. I'm all for it. All
So
for it.
much more, so much more than that.
Yeah.
And just as a brief little aside, I also want to say that I really trust people's autonomy. And if people
Yes.
want to just use psychedelics as a tool for exploration of their own minds, as long as they understand how to do that safely, I don't think psychedelic medicine needs to only be the purview of therapy or of doing deep work. Like sometimes people just need an opportunity to have a different experience of the
Yeah.
world, the way they think about things, or look at art or hear music in a different way. So um, I just like to make sure that I include that too, that these have been part of our history and our ancestry for a long, long time. Not
Yes.
obviously, but these were used for more than simply like trying to heal trauma. They were used for celebration. They were used to build the community or to divinate or to, yeah, a number of different reasons. So
Yeah.
I think a community acupuncture kind of model with ketamine would allow for a little bit more of that in a way, rather
Yeah.
than like you're checking off a box of illness, a
Yeah.
pathology. And, yes, let's make room for healing the pathologies, but also let's just trust that people are on their path for healing and it can take many forms.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a certain celebration and ceremony around alcohol, and around cigarettes in our
Yeah.
society, and that's totally acceptable. You see a group of people outside smoking cigarettes or drinking at a bar, you're like, hey, they're just having a good time. They're just, hanging out, being friends. And, to normalize this medicine in that same way is a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah. I think that obviously we need to discuss ways to do it safely. I think the
Yeah.
festival is one way that people do that. But yeah, I think it's important to just keep that that piece available as well.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, like a dinner party or whatever. I wanted to go back a little bit too
Yeah.
about food administration. So
Yep.
I was talking recently with some providers that do IV ketamine, and all of them were saying that the great thing about it was that if they did IV, they could titrate the experience, meaning if people started having a difficult time, they can turn it down.
Mm.
And I'm on a few different minds of that. So I'm a labor and delivery nurse as trained in my basic training, and I really do feel like there is some value in having that dark night of the soul. And
Yes.
I'm not saying everybody should have a bad experience with psychedelics, but everybody I've ever talked to, I mean, is that true? Let me just think for a second. I have met a few people that have had a difficult time with psychedelics that never did it again, which is totally fine. But
Yeah.
yet everyone, even those ones that had a really bad time, still came away from that with a lot of value.
Yeah.
And I am a little concerned. First of all, I think proper prep and a good set and setting really minimizes the risk of having a bad trip, right? But I think it requires more skill and is ultimately more valuable for healing if we, instead of turning it down, help people move through the challenging process. Like you have a little one, right? So
Yes.
you have a baby. You know that there's times where you're like, oh my God, I'm dying and that everything is poop. Like there's
And ketchup. Why?
so let's move through this. Like maybe we need to find a way or sometimes, like I've definitely found in birth and in medicine work, that sometimes people need to hit that wall. There's a lot that can happen when they finally break down. And I'm not saying break down in a like mentally break down, but there's something that allows that softening that we started talking with.
Yeah.
That when people finally like hit that place and maybe allow themselves to feel the despair of it or the grief of it or the overwhelm of it or how little they feel in the face of it and melt, it transmutes something.
Yeah.
Have you ever had that experience working on someone's body where they hit a spot in their body and it's like a emotional?
Oh my gosh.
It's so
Yeah.
important.
Well, and also pain is the cornerstone for growth, right? If I'm wearing shoes and they're comfortable and then all of a sudden they start getting painful, I'm like, yeah, I need to get some new shoes, right? And
Mhm.
we live in a society where we're so distracted from our own we don't have that interoception, the ability to kind of look within and go, oh yeah, hey, oh, that's a gas pain, or oh, hey, I'm feeling this. We don't have that ability. And so, and also for my 12-step work, it's like you got to hit a bottom to have
Mhm.
to create that willingness. You have to hit that bottom, that rock bottom. And so using that same analogy in something like this, I know I've had a couple of dark nights of my soul, just walking through some really difficult things and having, thankfully having the support up here in Portland and the people and the professionals to say you're exactly where you need to be, and this is necessary. Nobody really
And
tells
this
us
can
that.
still happen.
Yeah, yes, because we just see it. Like everybody posts their best pictures on Instagram, and we're all fronting a life that is not balanced. We have to have pain in order. We can't appreciate the good without the negative, or the
Yeah.
difficult. I should say difficult, not negative. But yeah,
Yeah. And I feel like that's some of the things that require good support, because it's, gosh, pain and suffering is such a delicate space.
mm,
And I never want to be in a place where I'm telling people to just suck it up and deal with it, or kind of come from a place of being
yeah,
harsh with people. Because I think that's part of, before our call, we talked a little bit about the patriarchy and the capitalist model is just to suck it up and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and
yes,
deal with it on your own, but instead to be like held and supported through that space, not enabled necessarily, but
yeah,
or have a weird codependency thing going on. But when you think about raising a child, right, we want them to stumble and push into their edges,
yeah,
but then we make things so that they can have little successes. So in my work as a basically I work as a nurse coach with this psychedelic informed perspective, and we try to have people kind of push into their pain edge with a lot of love and with a lot of breath and with a lot of embodiment, and reach, and we try to set the goals in a way that make it so people can get there. It might take a little bit of, like, imagine kind of pushing them up the stairs. Oh, they're gonna get there, but once they kind of like get it, then they
yeah.
can do the next one, and then they can take the next step, and it just requires a lot more
Um,
care, a lot more holding, a lot more supporting one another, and trusting that raising of one person, helping one person heal, has ripple effects. You know, it affects so much more than just that person.
oh
First
yeah.
of all, it's just such a powerful sense of accomplishment when people recognize, can look on back their healing path, like you shared, and other people can see, look how far you've come, and you can look back and see, oh my gosh, I really have made great progress. But it also shows other people how it can be done. It's a model for their friends or their family or their children or their community. Like, look, this is achievable, and
Yes.
really support. And when from there, my goal is just to help people find their own healing, because we're at a place now where we can't wait any longer.
No.
We can't wait for somebody to come in and save us. We've got to get creative and find ways to heal this planet. Things are bad. I don't need to say that to you. I mean,
Oh
things aren't
yeah.
good. And we can't keep doing what we've been doing.
Yeah. And we need collective work. In the comments right here, major malfunction. That's Dilara, our wonderful podcast editor, whom I love dearly. She's saying shadow work, it's a process, not a series of isolated effects, and then
Yeah.
also, that this circles back to community, healing together and working through difficulties as community. And that is so huge, because it's almost like, especially the United States, but we're all kind of walking through. It's almost like we're all healing our childhood trauma, and the United States has some really bad, childhood trauma that's coming up, and we need some healing from that. And it's collective healing.
Yeah.
It's the true essence of shadow work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for bringing up the shadow work piece. That's a big part of it. You mentioned pain, and I agree that there's a wisdom in changing your shoe out. That's something that you have to learn as you're growing. And maybe a different analogy, I'm not sure how to say this exactly, but there is a time that we have to also develop our ability to tolerate discomfort for growth. And it was really hard to see what happened to George Floyd. And for anybody that's been doing racial justice work knows that this has been going on for a long time, and there's so much pain involved in seeing that there's a piece that it is important to see that shadow and to let it hit your body, let it land. Like, I've talked to many people that maybe watched that video and were like, well, he was like this, or well, like immediately shifting onto all of these other pieces to kind of justify it or be angry, instead of like, how does that make you feel as one human watching this happen to another human being?
Yes.
And people can't sit with that. It's so painful. And I mean, it makes me want to cry thinking about it. But from that place, that is where I think the courage to stand up and make change happen comes from. You guys, I'm in Seattle, and we had our own political stuff going on up here, but Portland has just been an amazing place and a so upsetting place to witness.
Yeah.
I know there's some people out there that are interested in doing ketamine work with organizers.
Yes.
And I think there could be some really powerful healing that needs to happen in those circles as well. Also, BIPOC communities for sure. But there's so many other applications than this just individualized work. There's also a level of creativity that needs to come from this place of grief and witnessing, right? That the fucked up thing about COVID and the blessing. Also, I hope it's okay to swear. Sorry.
Oh, yes, it is. No shame here.
I'm good. The thing that's been so interesting about COVID, and especially with my clients, has been like people have had to slow down and stop just doing what they've been doing, which they weren't really happy about anyway. A lot of people, they were just like, if I just keep running through this, I don't have to look at any of this other stuff. And then when they had to like hunker down, how they feel about themselves is showing up really loud and clear in their faces, how they feel about the political situation. Like, there's a huge amount of just witnessing what's happening. That seems to be, I don't know. I hope that it's healing. I hope looking at some of the shadow is going to have a different outcome. And I hope that it's going to bring more creativity. And yet we're so divided. That's the part that is so concerning to me, is the division. And yet bringing back in that psychedelic informed perspective of connection and community, or the fact that we are all connected, and how can we still be connected with people that are so perhaps opposed? How can we remember who they are and how we treat them differently? I don't know.
I think it starts with remembering that we are human too. We treat our bodies like machines. The way that we treat our bodies is similar to the way that we treat the world. That what you were talking about is that micro macro, we're tapping into very finite resources, and we're not honoring the use of that. It's just like we just keep pulling from a well that is eventually going to empty. And then when it does, when our emotions and our energy are gone, like, we're surprised by it. We're surprised that we can't sustain it. And it just hasn't translated into that macro. We're still trying to push to drill oil in the Arctic. What the fuck? What? Didn't we just have an oil spill? Don't we have like climate change? Like, right? I mean, in Medford,
yeah,
it's just, there's
cognitive dissonance is really, really intense.
Yeah.
Really intense. And I don't know. One thing that I do think psychedelics are helpful for is helping us learn to sit with a broader range of diametrically opposed experiences. Like, the paradox factor that really comes in with the psychedelic experience is really, I think, helped me and helped other people kind of be in this time and still kind of find my center. One thing I do want to speak to, though, is I know during this time a lot more people are using psychedelics at home that maybe haven't used them before or haven't in a long time. And so I do a little harm reduction education. That's part of my role as a nurse. But I want to just people to make sure that they understand that when things are wild like this, high dose journeys are probably not a really great idea
Mm.
because I don't know what you believe about the energies in the world, but it's heavy, right? It's heavy right now. And it's really important if people are planning to journey that they understand that they can always do more later. Let's start slow and really make sure that you have the support that you need if you want to do this inner exploration. But another piece that I think is really important is for those that have a little more skill or experience with psychedelic medicines that are journeying. I really hope that they can dedicate their journey or their practice to that macro micro piece. Like, in what ways can I become a better person in service of more, in service of other, in service of the planet? I don't know what those look like, but I think sometimes those group journeys with ayahuasca, typically are people that are journeying in service of a process or some healing can be really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes back to that setting and intention. Thank you, Dilara.
Mhm.
I see
Oh
her in the
yeah,
comments. She's on it in the comments. Yes.
I know. I gotta keep scrolling through these comments.
I love it. I love it. Well, with the last couple minutes here, I kind of, one of the questions that we had is how do you see your practice expanding and evolving both in the near and distant future? You have so much coaching and you've made it so accessible for everybody. Talk to us about that and kind of what's coming up for you.
Oh my gosh, so many
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
So I have been doing one-on-one private coaching that's informed with my psychedelic background, and with some folks that have access to ketamine, we do work that way. Um, I do also do something I call travel insurance, which I don't do very much of, but when people are planning on journeying at home on their own, I'll do prep with them and integration. Or if someone's had an experience and they need support around that, I'll do some like little coaching around that, a couple sessions. But my my hope is really to reach in a bigger way to more people, because there's there's a lot of work to be done, and there's also a deep need for community. So I
yes,
currently have a group coaching practice, a cohort that's moving through right now. It's about 6 months, and we're working with the new and full moon. It gets a little witchy in there, but really because I'm trying to see what it would be like to shift out of our standard like time thought pattern and work in that way. But we are moving through Francois Bozerat's work with consciousness medicine and her holistic model for transformation, where she starts with working on the body for one portion. So we started with body, and then we work with mind, spirit, community, and environment as the phrases that we're going through, and then we'll integrate all of those pieces. And it's been really great. So everyone gets a one-on-one coaching through the month, but then we also have monthly group sessions, and we have a forum where we can communicate. And it's been super, super cool to see how, and you've probably seen this in recovery work, how someone becomes the medicine for the other. Like,
yes,
one person is really struggling with this piece, and someone's like, "Oh, baby, I've done that. Let me show
yeah,
you what it is for me that might be helpful." Or let us just stay. Like, there's just gets to be this really beautiful connection that happens in this group, and I'm not really like leading it. I'm like offering the material to contemplate, and it's just super cool to see how it kind of, in this container, is kind of being transmuted into the medicine that everybody's needing to work with. It's really, really cool. So I'm planning on launching another group probably mid-October.
okay,
So it'd be really great if anyone wants to know more about it. It's online, but at the same time, it's, we still try to keep it really, heart-centered. Um, Gosh, in the future, it's so hard to tell. Are we
oh
ever
my
going to
God,
see each other again?
I know, I
Are
know.
we ever going to hang out?
Are we
Like,
gonna get through 2020?
I would really like to do work with people over a year, ultimately in a group, and maybe do like quarterly in person as a group work. Perhaps when medicine's legal, we can do some work there, or depending on if, like, we're in Oregon and people can work in a small group setting in that way with psilocybin, if hopefully that passes, woohoo, like see, or what other options might be available. But a group working together over a period of time has a lot of power to make some transformation happen.
Yeah.
So that's a vision for me. And I also think there's a lot of amazing practitioners out there. And this isn't a question. I'm not coming from I need all of the people to work with me. No, if this is vibing with someone,
Yeah.
they contact me. But if it's not vibing, there's plenty of beautiful souls out there that are kind of doing this work.
Yes.
A big dream, of course, would be to have a space with land. I'm sure I'm not the only person that thinks about this, that could have resources where people could kind of come to, like a sanctuary space or a sanitarium like they had back in the day for healing, where you could come and have lovely nutrition and body work and movement and be in nature. And one other piece I wanted to add is that my business model is really informed by sister.is, which I haven't actually worked with them directly, but the Feminist Business School, they're really amazing. And they have this description of what a feminine economy could look like. So I just love looking through that. Yeah, there's the masculine economy. Why we're in the late stage capitalism we are in now. Can we look into the feminine model, which is
yes, look at the color and the abundance.
Much more psychedelic, right? Like, I'm much more interested in this care and empathy and connection with nature and interconnectedness and cyclical growth, and finding ways that we can work together in that way is really interesting to me. So based on that, like, my business practice is to find as many ways as I can have inclusivity. So all of my programs are structured with different pay tiers. So people can pay either at a supported rate, or they are supported by the other members, or a sustaining rate, which is kind of middle ground, or the supporting rate where they can support other people in it. And I'm not interested in asking people to prove to me how much money they make or anything like that. I don't care. I trust you to do what feels in alignment with what you need. And so I'm trying to put more of this kind of that business model into practice and learn more ways that I can work with others collaboratively that hopefully is more sustainable in the long term, and less really immersed in the American capitalist society that is setting the planet on fire, in my opinion.
Seriously. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I don't even know if it's opinion anymore. I think by now we're like, yeah.
Is it okay, Fred? Can we say that?
Yeah. I'll say it. I'll say it for us.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll say it for sure.
Yeah.
And I do think that the current model of healthcare is really broken. And if people can't see that with the COVID response, then I don't know what else it's going to take for you to see that. We've got to come up with a different model. This isn't working. It's not healing people.
Yeah.
It's healing some people. But
yeah. It's healing broken bones, and it's healing some people, and in the inverse, it's creating a lot of freaking trauma. It is traumatic to have to go to your doctor for antidepressants. You go to your MD, you don't even get you don't even get passed on to like a psychologist or anybody that you can actually talk to. That's just all of it is so unnecessary for where we're headed. And just having the opportunity to chat with you and hear and I mean, I was even with PPS as a volunteer. I was just sitting in the audience, and I was so blown away. And I was so blown away at like the passion that you had. And when that practitioner spoke up and like, how do we get this? It was kind of like, I don't know. And you're like, be bold. Now is the time to be bold. And I think 2020 is be bolder, Just get out there and do it.
So I hope more prescribers will figure out how to do it and can also charge lower rates. So I know we're running close to the edge of time, but I wanted to share real quick. I'm working with a group of practitioners here in the Pacific Northwest, and we're working on a model that's similar to the idea of the community acupuncture, but we have a prescribing provider we're working with that I hope is going to charge very, very low rates for just the medical clearing and prescription, so that we can keep the costs for the medicine work really low. I don't know what it might come out to, but hopefully like maybe, I don't know, 300 to $500 for a medicine session, which I don't think is what people are paying for ketamine right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see how it goes. Fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
Any timeline on that, or is that just something in?
Oh gosh, it's hopefully coming soon. We're in conversation with a medical doctor who's an anesthesiologist who's also a graduate of the Certificate in Psychedelic Assisted Therapy program from CIS, like I am.
Good.
I think we're trying to get really creative about ways we can do it and still serve people, you know, in a deep way, and get them good care and make sure that they're safe. So, and that would at this point just be doing one-on-one work with people because of COVID.
Yeah.
But the hope would be eventually to have more of that community acupuncture kind of model, where we could have a little bit more connection with one another in real life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then working on the psychedelic doula training, which will probably launch in springtime for enrollment. So we'll be accepting applications for that, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay. I want to be first on your list.
Awesome.
That sounds amazing. Psychedelic doula. Ugh. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So tell us and tell our members here where we can find you. I'm going to flip the camera here. I have your, let me go to your home screen.
My website.
Yes.
Guardinggateways.com. Yeah, I probably need to update that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, just getting in your Instagram, obviously.
Instagram, Facebook. I have a little Facebook group called Unveiled Vitality, where I try to do, in conjunction with the group program that I have, I try to just keep kind of feeding some of the good information that we're coming up with into that free group. And then occasionally I'll do some trainings in that group. I'm also working on putting out a psychedelic home use guide, harm reduction guide, that's going to be out probably in the next month or so. But finding me on Facebook or Instagram are great, or just send me messages are fine. And yeah, I'd love to connect as much as possible.
I'm so grateful for you, especially in this time and the work that you're doing. You know, the legalization, everything is underway with the psychedelic, you know, revolution there, but just to have something that's legal and accessible through people like you who have had the proper training. I mean, we really can't ask for anything more, you know, so other than other people getting in there.
Yeah. Big.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
But there's plenty of nightmare to go around. So
absolutely. But we're just so grateful for you to share this, not only at the conference, but follow back up with us and talk about these current affairs and just how people can find some healing.
So good. It's been so good talking with you, Josie. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. We have a couple minutes. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you'd like to?
I don't know. Are there any questions in the comments? I haven't really taken a peek.
Let me see. Not in the comment section, but we've had such beautiful comments. There was up at the beginning, Joshua Lee Bass. Let's see. It says, "Thank you for sharing. My leg was amputated in my teens, and the struggle has been rough through the years. I believe in this medicine. I would love to help in any way I can." I mean, that's the type of stuff that motivates me beyond anything. Is that education versus experience, and people have had this experience and have had so much help with it. So,
yeah, I think one way that people can help is, especially if you're connected through the Portland Psychedelic Society or other psychedelic organizations, is to talk about, there's so many people that are drawn to psychedelics because they hear of the profound things that happen for people, but it's really important to understand that most people, it's very few people that take a psychedelic and have a transformation so much that it resonates for their whole life. That sometimes it happens, and that's really incredible. But for most people, they have a peak experience, and then unless they do work to shift where they're at, nothing will change in their lives. So it's important to include in the conversation always the importance of integration and embodiment. I used to not be in that camp. I really wasn't. I used to be like, they're so great, and just let them fix everything. I've heard people say, Trump needs ayahuasca. It wouldn't make any difference, because really psychedelics are amplifiers of what's already happening. And unless they're supported into kind of examining that, nothing's going to shift. So for people that are listening and are thinking about working with ketamine or working on their own with psychedelics, find a way to have a safe container to integrate it. And it should, I really think it should be someone that has some skill set around integration. It's tricky to do this maybe with your partner. Not terrible. I think that's a great option if you have a good relationship, but sometimes it can get, you know, you kind of need your own little space to dink around in and then do some of the work inside.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great message to let people know. And I think also people should talk with their providers about prescribing ketamine, or if there's a prescriber that's watching that ketamine, just go with it. Lozenges are great. IM is great, you know, and there's plenty of practitioners out there that are interested in talking about it more. So
We are so, so grateful for you, Angela. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
awesome. So good to talk with you. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. We'll see you soon.
We did the first one.
We did it. Bye, girl.
Congratulations. Bye.
Right back at you.